All right, so this is the meeting of the Flood and Erosion Control Board of July 20th. This is Becky Bunnell, Chair, speaking, and if everyone could go around and announce who is here.
Okay, Don Lamberti, Vice Chair.
Peter Wiswell.
Prue O'Brien, Recording Secretary.
Okay, so our first agenda item is the minutes from last time, which I think, are these the ones that Dick took?
Yes.
And he didn't send them around, did he? Probably.
I have not seen them.
I think he may have sent them. You know what? It sounds like we might need to hold that over, because I forgot to send them out, and I don't think Dick. I can't remember if Dick sent them to everybody, but he might. If he did it over a month ago.
Yeah, I have not seen them, so.
All right, why don't we hold over the minutes then till next time?
I might need someone to make a motion.
Oh, can someone make a motion to hold over the minutes?
Okay, I make a motion to hold over the minutes.
Is there a second? All in favor, say aye. Aye.
Aye.
Okay, we will hold over the minutes till next time, and I'll make a point of making sure they get sent out ahead of time. The second item on call on the agenda is the Flood and Erosion Control Board Master Plan, and I was just sort of updating before you got on, Peter. I don't know how much you heard. Several items in our master plan were actually proposed as part of the ARPA funding, which is great. So that's like one of the things that we had in the master plan is some work on Perry's Green, and that was proposed for $1 million. Rooster River is in the master plan. I think a $3.2 million creation of detention basins was proposed. And then there was some downtown infrastructure that was proposed. So at this point, those were the only three items I picked up on that were in the ARPA funding proposal. It won't be voted on for another, I think, month and a half before it actually gets voted in. So hopefully all three of those projects make it. Unfortunately, the idea of a resilience fund did not make the list, and apparently a fund itself is not eligible for ARPA funding. So I'm going to be going back to the RTM, BOS, and BOF members and proposing that instead of a resilience fund out of the ARPA funds, that we think about doing some additional studies so that we can be shovel ready that when we get the next time we have a big storm and can be eligible for disaster relief funds and grants. So I have no idea if that'll. Yeah.
Becky,
Hello?
may I? This is Peter. I'm sorry. Sorry to interrupt. May I ask what it is that makes the resiliency fund not qualify?
My understanding is that it's because it's a ongoing fund, and all of the ARPA funds need to be spent within 2 years.
Well, what if we?
So there was a requirement to spend all of the money within a certain time frame. And so a fund which is designed to be a long-term entity wouldn't qualify. That was my understanding.
Okay, that makes sense.
Before, go ahead, Peter.
So your alternative, your workaround is to suggest one of the studies that we have been discussing over the past couple of years and spend that money within 2 years. Exactly.
And because I think the biggest thing that, we need to, help the Board of Finance and RTM and BOS be aware of is that, we have this flood and erosion plan that would help mitigate and create resilience for the town, but many items on that plan haven't been funded. And in order to be funded, either the town has to allocate study money out of its annual budgets, or we need to do something like this ARPA funds. And the really critical thing that we need to make everyone aware of is that one of the best ways to get grants is when the federal, when you have a big, named hurricane or storm and it's declared a federal disaster area, there are usually big tranches of money that are released for federal relief, and we can apply then for grants. But the only problem is you can't really apply for a grant on a study. You have to apply for a grant on something that's much closer to shovel ready, something that has already had a study that's been done on it, that has a qualified engineering driven plan that says this is what we want to do, this is how much it will cost, this is what it will look like. And then those are the kinds of projects you can apply for federal grant money. And so having a few more of those in grant ready status, I think, is going to be really important. So that's I think that the tactic we should take as flood and erosion is to propose 2 or 3 more of our studies be funded from the ARPA funds, because those studies can be done within the time frame, and that way we now have grant ready projects, eligible grant ready projects once grant money becomes available.
Mm-hmm. Becky, my follow-up question may be old news or an old question, but bear with me. Do we have an idea how much money we might be able to ask for if it's couched in the right terms?
Well, it's a good question, and I don't have an answer. What I can tell you is that we, as a town, received $24.9 million of ARPA funds. Brenda and her team put together a list of projects after consulting with, a lot of her staff and town members and stuff. And the list of projects that she came up with totaled $24.9 million. So we right now would be asking to bump another project in order to get our project replaced and put into the list. And I think, so we're going to have to do a lot of lobbying is what I'm saying. If we really believe in this, we need to sort of, I would say maybe we do $500,000 worth of projects as our proposal, but we're going to have to sort of propose that to the Board of Finance, the Board of Selectmen, and RTM, and then we're also going to probably have to get our beach community to write letters saying we would like some of the ARPA funds spent this way, so that people understand that this is something that is not just supported by flood and erosion, but supported by a broad base of community members as well.
Well, Becky, if mindful of the 24.9 amount and the fact that the 24.9, no surprise, has already been spoken for, but also the fact that, as we've discussed so many times, the tax base, the beaches, Rooster River, and other areas where we might have an interest is such a big percentage of the Fairfield tax base. Why not ask for $3 or $4 million with good support for it? I guess I'm asking this because I think I've told everybody that with another hat, I work as an arbitrator and a mediator. And the classic, I finished a mediation last week. The classic approach is you come in with a wish list, and then in your back pocket you have what you'll settle for. If we come in at $500,000, they'll beat us down to $250,000. Why don't we come in at $3 million and settle at $1 million? And then on the assumption we can get all those letters written.
I think what we need to do then is do a prioritized list, if you'd be okay with that, so that if they don't buy our full, I'd like us to be the ones picking and choosing the priorities. So let's take a look at our master list and rank order our priorities, and I'm happy to ask for more than $1 million.
it shouldn't be too difficult for us to support it with facts and figures. And the worst can happen is the 24.9 goes elsewhere. So we're back to where we started, but just an idea.
Well, another thought on that is that I would personally have chosen to spend a little less on Rooster River and take some of the Rooster River money and put that towards studies, because I feel like we do need to do some work on Rooster River, but to make Rooster River 100% better and not do any studies on any other area of town doesn't feel like a good balance for me. So I actually, we could choose. I hate to, to offer to take away a flood and erosion control project in order to put more things on, but we could say, let's take Rooster River down a little bit and put some of the Rooster River money in, and that would give people an easier way to think about trading things out.
That makes perfect sense. I guess underneath it all, I'm hearing about everybody in the country having their hand out and getting a big wad of cash. Gee, I don't want to miss the party. Let's put both hands out and see how much they give us. And I would think that we could get some letters written by a cross-section of people around town that would be very supportive of a pretty big number. Becky, just
which projects would you be working on?
Yeah, exactly.
So, Becky, if you were going to ask money for projects, which one would you prioritize?
Well, when you say projects, do you mean the studies?
Yes, studies, yes.
Studies.
I would
probably prioritize getting the Ash Creek raised up. We talked about doing the berm higher on Ash Creek. I'd prioritize that, I think. I would probably prioritize some of the ones that look at raising the roads, because that's important from an egress and ingress and safety
out on the
standpoint.
peninsula, you mean? Yeah.
That, and also we talked about raising the road over on the marina side, because I think the key is we want to keep our residents safe, and so higher roads allow us to make sure that emergency vehicles can get in and out, and that people can get in and out in a flood situation. So I would probably prioritize those ones. I'd have to go back and look at. I'm driving right now, so I actually don't have the list in front of me. So let me ask you guys, who might have access to the list, what would you prioritize?
Becky, what was your first one? I didn't hear it.
We were talking about raising the berm along Ash Creek.
Yes.
Which would mean that we would minimize the flooding that would come in on the sort of the marina side of the bowl, if you will.
Okay. Yeah.
But I think we might have to do both sections of that. The other thing that might make sense is we talked about trying to get some sort of berm that would go across from where the solar array is, that sort of the old dump site, and tie that into Pine Creek, and that would protect everything sort of north of that. It wouldn't protect you guys, Don, down where you are. Unfortunately.
Right now we're gone. We've been thrown to the wolves.
That's okay. Fairfield Beach has been thrown to the wolves too. So.
Yeah, and then how about the Fairfield Beach Club? Aren't you going to do something there to protect it?
That's already been approved. That was approved.
Okay.
So that's the good news, is that was approved.
Yeah, Becky, two comments. First, how about a more exhaustive study relative to a more exhaustive study, somewhat on the back of the Corps of Engineers study, relative to beachfront erosion control. And then number two, having said that, I'm a little bit concerned that if we stack it too much in the direction of people on the beach, that we'll get the rich guy argument in opposition. So I hear what you're saying about Rooster River, but I think it's important that we get them on board, maybe the Mill River people on board, the people in Southport on board, and any others who are not on the peninsula or close to.
Well, Peter, I agree with you. I mean, it's interesting that the three projects that made it onto the list were all non-beach projects. So none of the beach projects made it onto the list. Perry's Green,
okay,
which is Southport, made it on. Rooster River, which is obviously a riverine flooding issue, made it on. And the downtown infrastructure flooding issue made it on. But there was not one beach project that made it on. So I think we have a good case to say that we're not prioritizing the beach community. We're actually just trying to even it out so that we look at flooding across the whole town. And there were no beach flooding projects on. We're remediating that by adding some beach flooding projects so that we are now looking at flooding across the whole town.
Okay, understood. Yeah, and forgive me for not having been on top of all this. You're saying that some of the other areas I'm talking about, those people may already be on board because funds may have already been allocated for them.
Well, they were on the ARPA list, yes.
Yeah, okay. Yep, okay, I understand. So,
yeah.
Then if there's something that could be done on the study side to move along the beachfront issues, maybe that's not quite as high a priority right now, but if we're talking about maximizing what we ask for, why not make it a big wish list?
I'm happy to add that, yeah.
Well, who's that Russian lady from Circa there? She was going to do some computer studies for us, wasn't she? Remember, she was going to study something about the.
Yeah, I need to do the follow-up. She was doing some modeling for us.
Yeah, could we get some money for her to do more modeling?
Well, that's in essence what this would be. Then you're right, because I mean, we'd be modeling different ways to mitigate erosion and mitigate, wave action on the beach.
Yeah, so if we could pay her, she might be a good candidate to do something.
Yeah, Don, that's a good idea.
Yeah, if you could throw some money their way, I'm sure they'd be very happy.
And GZA was also giving us a proposal, and they haven't really gotten back to us. So and they were prepared to kind of take her work and do the extra modeling, so we could, give them that money. So let's go back, and I think the action is to go back and look at our list, prioritize some of the beach projects to put into the ARPA funding bucket, and with the rationale that we want to look at flooding across the whole town with ARPA funds, not just the three projects that are on there, but beach was noticeably absent, and make it a long wish list, to Peter's point, prioritized wish list that probably is closer to $2 to $3 million versus $1 million. And then, so here's my recommendation. I'm happy to go back and take a first stab at that and send it around to everybody. There is some urgency. I don't think we can wait completely for our next meeting. So what I would propose is let me go take a look at it. Why doesn't everyone go look at our list? But let me take a first stab at how I would prioritize the list and send it out to everybody. Could everyone commit to looking at it and feeding comments back?
Yeah, we can do that.
By email.
Absolutely.
So we can get an agreed list that we can then take. And then the second action item, I think, is that we're going to need to start to recruit beach members to write in support of this, so that we get, a groundswell of support. Otherwise, it's just Flood and Erosion making a recommendation.
Agreed.
Sounds good, Becky.
Becky and Don, may I ask, do either of you have an idea relative to the projects that Brenda is proposing for the 24.9? I mean, are there 2 or 3 big ticket items?
I have the full list. I can send it out after this meeting.
I was just wondering if there was anything controversial that could be directly or indirectly referenced in our letters. Like, if they want to put another $5 million into the Richardson Golf Course, which I personally think was a waste of money with the clubhouse and everything else in the first instance, that would be a nice target, but golfers might disagree, or something else. But maybe they're all well thought out. And, good.
There's always good targets. Yeah.
I mean, I think there were some very local projects that we could maybe push back on that didn't really impact the town wide. There was the Foursquare neighborhood project. They were very active, apparently. But a lot of the projects were really great projects, I have to say. I mean, there was a lot of good social services and Operation Hope and things that will really help build back our community. There were some little things like Jennings Beach, refurbishment, but that wasn't very much money, I don't think. There was a big ticket item that was, I think, for the police. They wanted to have motion cams or some sort of. They wanted to really kind of bring themselves up into the 21st century. They want body cams, I guess.
Okay.
Yeah,
that was $3 million. That was quite a bit of money as well.
Wow.
So I'll send the list around.
Okay. Thank you.
Sounds good.
All right. So let's move on to the next part of the item, which is how are we going to engage the community to help us write letters? What are your guys' thoughts on that? And how do we get a groundswell of people to support these kind of projects added to the ARPA list?
I guess if you had email in the Pine Creek area, we don't have an email database. If you had a form letter to fill out, I could put in everybody's mailbox and with an explanation, please, email this or please send this, something like that.
We could definitely do that. A lot of mailboxes, but we could Xerox a letter, I'm sure.
Yeah, if you got a letter with like a form letter or something, I gladly take it and put it in everybody's mailbox. I could do that.
It's a lot of mailboxes.
It's 100 of them.
Oh, on Pine Creek, so how do we get the rest of the beach?
Yeah. Well, yeah,
Don,
yeah.
I'm sorry. What was that relative to again?
If we had a form letter that somebody can just fill out and send mail in, I could put a copy in everybody's mailbox down here on Pine Creek.
Yep, understood. Yeah. Okay. Yep.
Just if you have an email, I guess you can email it to people, but I'm not tuned into email stuff, to be honest with you. It's I think a lot of people are, but you have to have an email database for that.
I think we need to start building one then.
Yes.
I think probably right.
I can approach the Fairfield Beach Residents Association. They have a 600-person email database, and ask if they'd be willing to put it out in their newsletter.
That would be excellent. Yes. Yep.
Since I happen to write the newsletter, I'm happy to write it. but I do have to get the board approval to send it out, because that's, you have to make sure that the board is on board with this. But the board did say that coastal resilience was one of their top priorities in terms of what they feel they can do as an association. So I don't think there'll be any pushback, but I will have to get them
to
agree to it.
That sounds very reasonable.
I think it's a great idea.
Would anyone be willing to write to all the RTM members and the Board of Finance members sort of a personal letter saying why we want this as opposed to a form letter? I think if we can kind of personalize it, it's going to make it more impactful for these RTM members as opposed to just saying, dear RTM members, the Flood and Erosion Control Board thinks you should do this.
Yeah.
So
well, I think you're right. If you could get some talking points, I'd gladly do it. Yeah. I'm terrible at writing.
Yeah. Becky and Don, I'll be honest, having been basically out of the loop for 3 months, I'd be delighted to do it, but my fear is that I'd miss some points and I need a little time to catch up. But I'm in your hands.
Well, here's one thing you could do, Peter, if you're willing to, if you have a little time, if you could go to the tax assessor's office and get them to pull, the new grand list now is out, so we now know what what we need to do is get a cost of all the buildings in the floodplain. What would that represent in terms of appraised value, and what would that also represent in terms of percent of tax revenues to the town? So, because I think that makes a very compelling point for a Board of Finance person and an RTM person to say, we know it's roughly 15% of our housing stock, but is that 15% of the tax base, or is that 20% of the tax base? Because we might be more expensive than other areas of town potentially.
Probably are.
I'm delighted to do that. Let me make sure I have the question right. Do I ask for a list of all buildings in the floodplain, or do I simply ask for a gross number? And do I ask for that list or gross number to include a gross tax amount or an individual by house or lot tax amount? You have to help me on what I ask for.
I mean, I think what you're going to have to ask for, because he's not going to know what the floodplain is, so you'd have to say all. I mean, we could sort of just generalize that all the buildings below the post road, in essence, are roughly in a floodplain, with the exception of Casco Hill. Yeah. So maybe you ask for it that way. I think what you need to do is ask for the residences primarily, because a lot of the other buildings don't pay taxes. So, there's 5 churches in the floodplain, but they don't pay taxes. There are 3 schools in the floodplain. They don't pay taxes. There are multiple town buildings. They don't pay taxes. So even though there's actually a lot of assets that would get ruined, they don't actually pay taxes. But maybe we actually get the total amount of the appraised value of all the buildings, and then we get the tax revenue that's generated by all those buildings, knowing that a lot of the buildings won't actually pay taxes, but we still have a lot of tax revenue despite that. Does that?
Well, then,
see if that. Would that be,
Becky, how about if question 1 is, what is the appraised value of all buildings below the post road, with the exception of Sasco Hill? Right. And then will they be able to answer the follow-up question, what is the tax revenue from that same area? Will they be able to pull that up?
They should be able to. I mean, let's see what they say, and if they need more specificity, then we can try to, let's see what they ask for. But I'd start there.
Okay, and when would you like it by?
What do you think is realistic? Give them 3 weeks? I mean, I'm a little sensitive to the fact that this letter and this messaging has to go to the RTM and Board of Finance people probably no later than 3 to 4 weeks from now. So I think maybe we ask them to pull that in 2 weeks if they can. I have no idea if that's realistic. I don't know what people's vacation schedules are, but it might just be a really easy thing to pull. I just don't know.
Well, why don't we aim for getting it within 2 weeks, and if we can't, we adjust.
Sounds good.
Yeah, let's try that.
Okay, I will undertake that one.
Okay. All right, so I think we have a plan. Let's move on to the next item of business then, which is any old or new business that may come before the board. Does anyone have any old or new business?
No, not really.
I don't either. Yeah. I think this is the most important thing we can be doing right now is this appeal to try to get more projects funded out of ARPA.
Right.
So. Okay. A bit of old business / new business. I found that there's a new house being built, or I should say a new monstrosity being built on the creek side of Fairfield Beach Road, probably about 1,100, immediately west of the first home, right across from the fire training center. Do you two know which one I'm talking about? It's very tall.
Yes, that was a lot that was just recently sold for like $326,000. It was bought by Antonio, who's going to turn it into one of his Blue House student rentals.
Yep.
Apparently, that house that he's building has already been approved by the prior owner, had already gotten approval from the building department and zoning. So it never went up for variances or anything like that.
Okay, it's just
I'm sort of surprised because it feels like there had to have been a variance because that house is way too close to the street and there has to be setbacks. So I was sort of surprised myself to see that house never had to go to ZBA, but to my knowledge, it did not go. So that's all I can tell you, but that's my understanding of what that house is.
Isn't there also a height restriction?
The way that the height works at the beach area is that it is the midpoint of the roof. So what a lot of builders do is they make their roof go really far down so that the midpoint is higher. If that makes sense.
Yeah, it does. But and for that one, that's not what they're doing. And I guess just as a very general comment, I'm just amazed that this fella is able, in the midst especially of as strong a real estate market as we have now, he is allowed to put up the monstrosities he does that are so out of character with the beach. But if the prior owner got the necessary permit, if no variance was required, well, shame on planning and zoning, but I'm just amazed that these places just keep going up. I mean, they worry so much about if we raise our houses and whether you're over 50% of this and what the setback is from the beach, and then they allow those things.
Peter, I don't know what to say other than I was also surprised that didn't have to go before Zoning Board of Appeals, and maybe it did, and I just missed that meeting. I usually try to look at all the agendas of those meetings because I'm concerned about overbuilding in the beach area just because of safety and safety issues, having too many people down at the beach. So I usually look at all ZBA agendas, and I never saw that come up. But it might be worth going and asking, was a variance required, and if so, why? If not, why not? Because I think
you know what, if I'm going to be at the town hall, I'll go to planning and zoning as well and ask.
Yeah. I mean, it frankly shocked me that a variance wasn't needed, but maybe there was one, and I just somehow missed it in the meetings. I might have been away that one time.
Well, I will check and I will report back. I just
okay. Sounds good.
It's just disappointing, but I'll check.
Okay.
Well, if there's no other new or old business, I am going to close the meeting.
Sounds very good. Can I make a motion to close the meeting?
Second.
All right.